In this video I will show you my way of playing the Caro-Kann defense, and that way you will be able to play the Caro-Kann as well without needing to study any chess opening theory. So there are actually three things that you need to know. What to do against the advanced variation, that is the first thing we are going to cover. Also what to do against the exchange variation, that is the second thing we are going to cover. And then also what to do if they play their knight to c3. So it's important to know these three IDs. So we'll start off with the first ID. So if you know the Caro-Kann starts off with e4, then of course we play c6, which is the Caro-Kann defense. And then here almost all players with the white pieces are going to play d4, and then we play this move d5. Of course there are different moves here that white could play, but pretty much everything will lead into one of these three variations that I will show you. So the reason that we play this opening is because we want to attack the white central pawn with our d5 pawn. That is a really important concept, because we want to break up white center from the start. The reason we don't play this d5 move immediately, like you would in the Scandinavian defense, is just because you would be losing a tempo with your queen. So that is why we play the Caro-Kann defense. Here white has multiple options, but first we're going to take a look at what if they push, which is the most played move by white. The good thing with the Caro-Kann is you will get to develop your light squared bishop outside of the pawn chain. What does this mean? Well, in many openings like the French defense, you will have a pawn chain like this, and your bishop will be stuck inside and be rather passive or even useless the entire game. So here the idea is to develop the bishop quickly and then later close this pawn chain, so we already got our bishop active. Here, of course, the player with the white pieces can do multiple things, but pretty much everything leads to the same. I will show you first the move knight f3, and of course here the next thing we do is to close up our pawn chain. Then the best move for white is the move bishop to e2, but actually so many players play this move bishop to d3. And if they play bishop to d3, this is pretty good for black because you can just capture, and then you can push this c5 pawn attacking in the center, and we will take a look at this later as well. That is something you will get a lot, but the better players, they will play their bishop here to e2. My idea is to immediately go for the c5 move, because basically with the Caro-Kann we want to have a French defense-like position, and this is the French defense main position. But the big advantage is that we got our bishop out of the pawn chain. So here we are immediately pushing this pawn a second time to start attacking the white center. So that is why we play the move c5. Here white can do multiple things. One variation of course is, for example, if they play this move pawn to c3, which is the most played move. Some players will also play bishop here, which we will also take a look at. So if they play c3, you develop the knight, just simply putting more pressure on this pawn. They will most likely castle. And you can always place this move a6 here to stop the enemy bishop, because you don't really want to get this pin, because your knight is going to be an important piece here, putting pressure on the center, and also in the future our knight is probably going to jump to this b4 square. So that's why we play something like a6, for example bishop e3, and then you go queen to b6. And I love going queen to b6 after they have developed their dark squared bishop, just because this is already a little bit annoying for white, since now this pawn is weak, they have to do something about that, and at the same time we do have so much pressure here in the center. So most white players will play something like b3, just pushing this pawn to solve the problem, and then you can play your rook to c8. And the main idea to remember in the Caro-Kann that I play is to go for this square, to go for the c2 square. And we are going to try to put as much pressure there as we can. So that is why I developed the rook. I don't go for an early castle, as you can see here. These pieces are still undeveloped, but that's not a problem, we will develop them later. For example here knight to d2, and then you can take, and here of course there are many ways white can take. We are going to continue with pawn takes. Of course if they take with the knight, the best thing you can do is take, and if they then take with the bishop, you can play this move bishop to c5, and this trade is also good for black. And as you can see on the screen, we can develop the knight to e7 and then to g6. So this is a pretty good position for black. If they capture with the bishop, which is probably the worst option, you can just take with the knight as well. And then I like to drop back here with the bishop instead of playing this move bishop here, because otherwise you would be losing, and then yeah, as you see, this position is not so good for black. So I like to drop back, and then later on we will play this bishop c5 and then develop the knight. But as I said, we're going to continue with the move c takes d4. And here you can already see our plan in action, knight to b4, and this is the main idea. We are going to put a lot of pressure here on the enemy queen side. Of course, in some variations, white will try to stop you earlier with the move a3, which is not a problem. Then you can still develop the bishop and develop the knight, as you will see. But here we are playing knight to b4. And our idea is, of course, to go in here and be annoying, attack the rook, attack the bishop, create all sorts of problems for white. And actually this move, knight e1, which I don't think you will see a lot, is one of the ways that white can defend this. Of course, if white just plays any move, you always have some pretty annoying moves. And actually here, you can, for example, play this move bishop c2, attacking the queen. And it's already kind of hard, like what are you going to do with the queen? For example, queen here, but this position is already quite good for black. And there are multiple things you can do here, but as you can see, the white pieces are kind of cramped and black is the one with all the space. You can also, of course, if they play a random move, jump in with the knight, attack the rook. But the little bit of a problem here that you have is that your rook is under attack and you haven't castled yet. So that's why I don't jump in with the knight immediately. So for example, a variation like this, and then once you have set up this ID with these pieces, you can now start developing this knight and then also developing this bishop. If they kick you away, that's not a problem. Here, for example, you can always jump in. If they trade, you can trade. For example, queen there, and then knight goes to f5, and you have pressure on this bishop, and you have pressure on the center. Also, we have pressure here, but it's important not to take this, of course, because of rook b1, and then this bishop is now pinned to your queen, and you will lose material. So be careful. Sometimes you can take this b3 pawn, but that's not a good move. It's better to play something like this. And then, of course, here white has to find a move, but as you can see, white is really cramped. White doesn't have a lot of moves. Maybe they can play something like b4, then you can develop the bishop. Maybe something like rook c1, and then we can castle. And this is like the main idea. If white plays everything perfectly, you will just get a position like this, and you will have a lot of play here on the queen side as well. And you can try to play for tricks here on the queen side. The next thing we are going to take a look at is this variation. So again, the Caro-Kann advanced variation. So this is still example number 1, as I said, the advanced variation. And here we are going to take a look at what to do if they play this variation with the bishop d3, which is probably the thing you will see the most, even though this is worse for white than what I just showed you. But many players play this move. It's always easy to just capture this. We are actually really happy here because our bishop is usually a kind of a dead piece, and here we can just exchange it for white's best bishop. And then again, same idea, c5, c3, develop the knight. Here I like to play this move h6 as well in many of these lines, because sometimes it can be a little bit annoying if a white piece gets here. So for example, bishop e3. And again, the bishop has moved, so now we could play queen b6. You can always play queen b6 a little bit earlier, but I like to wait until after they move the bishop. And to bait the bishop move, you can always make one of those pawn moves, a6 or h6. And this variation, of course, since the light squared bishop is already gone, h6 makes more sense as a kind of waiting move to stop pieces and also to bait this bishop. And then again, here we have the queen out, probably a move like b3, takes. Again, many variations here. Pawn takes is probably the best. If they go for knight takes, there's takes, bishop here. And yeah, again, they can take, but this is all still fine for white, and we will be able to develop. It's possible for white to play something like queen here. There are multiple things you can do. You can actually play this move g5, or you can even play this move, allow them to come in, play the rook, and you will get a lot of pressure here. This might seem crazy, but as you can see, we can castle kingside here. We can get rooks, the knight, the queen all involved. So this is possible. Of course, if you want to play it safe, there are other things you can do as well, like g6 or even g5. Maybe g6 if you like to play safe, but I would go for this variation, which is a lot of fun as well. But if they are a little bit better players, they will take with the pawn probably, and then you can of course develop your knight. And we can go for this ID, kicking out the queen, also taking control of this square. We actually want to put this knight here, but I don't play it immediately here because there is a trick here by white, which is knight takes, and then you lose this. So that is something you have to be careful about. So that is why I like to go for this variation, knight b4 first, kicking the queen, and then I go here. Because now, of course, if they take this, well, the queen is no longer on this diagonal. And even if they kick your knight on the next move, you might think, well, did you just not lose a move? It doesn't really matter because our knight is here, the queen is no longer in position, and we can even take this. Of course, if they go back with the queen, you have to take this because otherwise you would still be running into the same trick by white. So probably you move like b4, bishop develops, rook in, castles. If they attack your queen, it doesn't really matter. This is actually also an interesting square to keep in mind for the queen. If they go in with the knight, you can just take it. And then you can play something like knight a5, put the knight here. And that is where I will end this variation, just to show you. This is how you play the advanced variation. So now we are done with the first example. What to do against this bishop e3 move and this bishop e2 move. And those are lines you will get most of the time. This position is pretty easy for black to play. It's also a good position for black. There's actually not that much that white can do. White is already in a kind of bad position here. And as you can see, we have pressure, we can break with this pawn, and we will have a full queenside attack with lots and lots of pressure on the white position. Then this is what I wanted to show you, the exchange variation, and that is the second example that you need to know. So the exchange variation, what to do if they take your pawn. Well, of course, first off, you're going to take back with the pawn, not with the queen, because otherwise, yeah, you would get a Scandinavian-like position, which is of course perfectly playable if you like the Scandinavian defense. And I have many videos on the Scandinavian as well, but we are playing the Caro-Kann, so let's just take back with the pawn. And the best move for white is probably c4. I don't think that is the move you will see the most, but I will show you this because this is the Panov attack and this is the best variation for white. The idea is to just develop your knight. Of course, if they immediately take, you can take, not really a problem. And then you play this move e6. And all of this is pretty normal, that's why I'm going a little bit fast, because it's just generic moves. You are just developing, keeping pieces here. At some point they will take, you can take back with the knight, doesn't really matter. You can develop all natural moves, you can castle, castle. And then again, moves like queen b6 are always good in the Caro-Kann, so you can play that here as well. And then, for example, in this variation, we are now threatening to win this pawn. And it's a little bit hard. For example, here we can take this. But then you would get something like takes, takes, queen takes, pawn takes, and then if they play this, of course, they are losing the bishop, so they have to do something else, maybe take with the bishop, takes. You can get crazy positions like this, but this is all pretty decent for black. A position like this will probably be a draw if white goes for all of these exchanges. If they don't go for the exchanges, you still have a chance to build up a winning advantage with the moves you can see right now. You always have pressure of capturing this, but of course they can also defend it. And in those cases there are always moves like bishop here, and then also developing your rooks and going for a queenside initiative. This is another example of variation 2, so the exchange variation, and that is if they don't play this move c4. And this variation with knight f3 is the one you will see the most if you are playing online. Everything is pretty similar as we saw before. Here we actually develop the bishop to pin this knight, which is always good because, as I said, you want to close this, and if you can exchange your bishop for anything, that's pretty much a good position. For example, something like this you might get a lot of the time. And here white is going to go for a move like knight c3 instead of the c4 push. Of course, if they go for the c4 push, those positions are like the ones I just showed you. If they go for knight c3, you will have this kind of position. And this is also pretty good for black. I'm just showing you some moves. All of this is pretty natural, just develop your pieces. You will get a position like this. And again, always queen b6. And even here, queen b6 is a tricky move because this variation is actually the most played variation by white. And queen b6 here is already attacking 2 pawns at the same time. So white can only defend one, and then you are already winning material. And this is the most played variation actually in this position. Another thing they can do is a move like moving the queen here. But still, this also wins a pawn. So yeah, all of these positions are pretty good for black. You just play normal developing moves. And you always keep in mind that you have this queen here. You can move your rooks to these open files. You can push with c5. Sometimes you can jump in with the knight here. So a really good position for black. And then the third thing, so this is variation number 3 that we have to take a look at. That is what to do if they play knight c3, which is the third most played move. So those are the 3 variations you need to know. Again, quick reminder, advanced, exchange, and then knight c3. Well, we play this pawn here because we want to destroy the center, so we destroy the center whenever we can. And again, same idea, develop the bishop to this f5 square, putting some pressure. The good players will go for something like knight h3, making you go back one square, but that's not really a problem. And then you will get a variation like this. Many players always offer you this trade, which is actually not so good by white. It's always better to play something like this. But many players will give you this trade. Just take it if you can. And then a position like this, if you have seen my other videos, you will see that this is actually similar to the Scandinavian defense, the Valencian variation. A position like this, where you go for this setup with your knight, your bishop here, the knight here. And basically we are going to try to play against this pawn on the d file. So you usually play a move like queen c7 because we want to put our rooks here on this d file. White players will often go for something like knight e5, and then you have something like rook a8. And if you really want to study more of these positions, you can always take a look at my videos on the Scandinavian defense, especially the Valencian variation. But the main idea here is that we want to, in the future, push the c5 pawn after we have lined up a lot of pressure here. So something you get a lot from white is, for example, takes, maybe a move like c3. But here you can see we already have this move c5, and this is pretty annoying because of course they can't capture, otherwise they lose the queen. So maybe they have to do something like go back here, then you have something like knight g4. Of course, if they don't play c3, they can also play something else. Let me think for a moment, what else are they going to play? Queen f3 as a move that is played here as well. Well, again, you can just always put lots and lots of pressure here. Sometimes they capture, that's even more pressure. And even if they go for this move c3 and so many variations, you will actually have this push here as well. So that is the main idea behind this knight c3 variation. And then as a bonus, I will show you just something else quickly. That is, sometimes white will try this variation, where they quickly try to attack. This is the bayonet attack, where they quickly try to attack your bishop. And I just wanted to show you this so you don't run into surprises. This is actually only played 5% of the time, so not that much. But white can always try this. You can just drop back the bishop, and then they will try to do this, of course, to just immediately destroy your bishop. Because if you just play a normal move, well, you get something like this, bishop here and f3, and you are losing your bishop. So if you don't want that to happen, just play a move like h5, and everything is fine here. Of course, there are more things white can try, but with good play, this position is pretty nice for black. And if you just remember this h5 move, you won't lose your bishop. So that's it for this video. I just would like to ask you, if you like this, leave a comment, leave a like, also subscribe to the channel. That is it for the Caro-Kann defense. And as always, I'll see you in the next video. Bye!